Hi, my name is Johanna Levy. I'm ESR 14 and I'm based at the Universities of Granada and Bologna. Since I'm pregnant, I can't be with you today here at this conference, so I hope that this video replaces my physical absence to some extent. In my research project, I've been working on smartphone apps for the observation and analysis of menstrual cycles. The title of my presentation is Connected to My Body, App Data Entanglements in App-Supported Menstrual Tracking. And I will give a brief insight into how period tracking affects the understanding and experience of period selves and shapes our bodies. Menstrual or period apps are software programs that run on smartphones and other portable devices such as tablets. Through collection, storage and analysis of the data entered by users, menstrual apps allow for recording and observation of menstrual cycles and associated sensations, emotions and behaviors. Among the functions offered by period apps are the prediction of menstrual and ovulation dates, observation and analysis of physical and mental parameters such as changes in body weight, mood swings and vaginal discharge, as well as tracking of sex life and sleeping patterns. Moreover, several apps provide medical information on menstrual cycles and reproductive health, and some facilitate the interaction between users and healthcare professionals, users and other users, and users and partners via fora and sharing features. App-supported menstrual tracking builds upon a long history of menstrual cycle observation, which includes techniques such as paper calendars, birth control chains, and love alarm clocks. However, there are some important differences between non-digital forms of period tracking and app-supported observation of menstrual cycles. I argue here that these differences have an impact on users' practices of observation and analysis of menstrual cycles and lead to changes in people's understandings and experiences of their periods, bodies and selves. Drawing on a semi-structured interview study with 26 menstrual app users from Vienna, Austria and Granada, Spain, as well as an autoethnography carried out using 4 menstrual apps myself, I will focus here on 2 principal themes. In the first part, I will examine the changes in the understanding and experience of periods, menstruating bodies and selves, resulting from the datafication of menstrual observation and related assumptions. In the second part, I will argue that app-supported menstrual tracking participates in the production and transformation of bodies. I will explore the ways through which entanglements between users, menstrual flows, data, apps, and other actors are being established. To sum things up, I will then briefly address resulting gender and other socio-cultural inequalities. In the last decade, smartphones have become intimate companions of our everyday lives. Given their ubiquity, menstrual apps are constantly available and thus can be accessed by the users at almost any given time and location, broadening the temporal and spatial range of menstrual cycle observation. In addition, period apps provide users with a whole range of tracking categories, hence expanding the range and depth of menstrual cycle observation. A further difference between analog and digital ways of menstrual tracking is the immediacy of the information that is fed back to users via graphs and tables. Then there are some important changes regarding the translation of menstrual information into digital data and related assumptions. When people engage in app-supported menstrual tracking, period dates and menstrual cycle associated factors have to be transformed into trackable information. It has been shown that during self-tracking, corporeal, emotional and behavioral factors are made into quantifiable, standardizable, machine-readable, algorithm-ready entities. Whereas the quantification of certain factors during menstrual tracking might seem straightforward, such as the recording of menstrual dates, things become more complex when people want to observe factors which are commonly perceived as subjective, as for instance emotions, corporal sensations, such as pain, or behavioral data. Hence, self-tracking of periods requires the abstraction as well as the imposition of boundaries of the measured aspects. Emotions are assigned to a limited number of pictograms provided by menstrual apps, and different pain levels are categorized to available strengths. The information entered into menstrual apps is processed by algorithms and fed back to users. Algorithms have been shown to carry specific values and to build up upon certain conventions which include gendered, biomedicalized, classed, etc. assumptions. However, given their inaccessibility, invisibility, and malleability, inscribed preconceptions are often difficult to identify. As a result, many of my research participants neither questioned the objectivity of the app's depictions nor their fragmentary character. Rather, bodies and periods were understood as visualizable, knowable, and thus comparable, controllable, and improvable projects. Consequently, period tracking often led to the normalization of menses, bodies, and selves, categorizing them into irregular, unhealthy, reproductive entities. App-supported menstrual tracking does not solely lead to changes in people's understanding and experience of menstrual cycles and bodies, but actively participates in the production and transformation of bodies, which increasingly become entanglements of flash information and digital data. Many of my interview participants reported on having established relations to their menstrual apps, smartphones, data, other users, etc., albeit through different means and to different extents. In the following, I will briefly describe 3 ways through which these linkages were created. Often, experiencing a high degree of correlation between the app's calculation and actual experiences promoted an understanding of a close corporeal connectedness to smartphone and apps. Reversely, interviewers experiencing considerable differences between predicted and actual menstrual dates tended to consider the connections of their bodies to their devices as less profound. Besides cognitive relations, the interviewees also established emotional linkages to their devices and data. While some highlighted novel vulnerabilities and dependencies related to period tracking, others mentioned the creation of friendship-like relationships to their apps. During the autoethnography, and just like my interviews, I also experienced increased levels of stress when confronted with differences between actual and predicted menstrual dates. Next to cognitive and emotional relations, entanglements of app-body data were also established on a sensorial level. Often the interviews associated the menstrual app's data visualizations with a feeling of the bodily self or vice versa. Here too, menstrual apps and smartphones were frequently perceived as intimate parts or extensions of users' bodies as devices broadening the body's sensory apparatus. The sensorial ties formed during menstrual tracking were not limited to visual stimuli, but were also promoted by haptic interactions, highlighting the importance of the role of hands in the study of mobile devices. To conclude, I would like to focus very briefly on some of the most prominent inequalities which arise and are being challenged by period tracking via apps. As I've shown above, menstrual tracking via apps promotes an understanding of bodies and periods as visualizable, knowable, comparable, controllable, improvable projects. In my study, period tracking often led to the normalization of menses, bodies, and selves, categorizing them into irregular, unhealthy, reproductive entities. On the other hand, however, the participants also reported on menstrual tracking as a joyful practice, helping them to get to know their selves and bodies and to be more aware of their cycles. Moreover, menstrual tracking led to the creation of novel vulnerabilities and dependencies in some cases, requiring users to engage in emotional work in order to manage stressful discrepancies, for instance between predicted and actual cycle dates. Others, however, experienced apps as an unbiased and accessible friend or companion with whom intimate data could be shared. There are many more inequalities highlighted by the research participants that I couldn't mention in this presentation, including issues of gendered menstrual app design, the use of collected menstrual data beyond people's control, practices of self-responsibilization, as well as users actively shaping their technological futures. Thank you so much, and for feedback, ideas, and questions, please send me an email.